Okay, well,
Thank you,
welcome
great
aboard, Angela Keaton.
Thank you, and no, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak on something that is kind of near and dear to this kind of staff we have at antiwar.com. And when we were kind of tossing it around the other day, talking about just our positions, our stands, where we have, because a lot of these things are tangentially related to peace, but they're still very important. And we were thinking too much about high concept like free trade, peace, and where Bitcoin is part of that, and things like Silk Road and all these new technologies certainly allow for that, and maybe threats to current structures that exist. And that's all really good. But what always gets me upset about this case and about other ones like it is, at any given time, if you're into libertarian media or libertarian activism, you generally know people who are either in jail or in prison for different reasons, under the general category of political prisoners, whether it's civil disobedience or they're computer programmers or journalists or whistleblowers. And that makes it very personal, because that means there's a lot of people in the world who know someone who's incarcerated. And I don't know, maybe libertarians aren't always the best at discussing that particular issue, but one way it might be approaching it is that we talk to people who have friends and family in prison about Ross and about why this cause and what generally it means to all of us. So thank you, Lynn, and thank you for being such a unifying and peaceful figure and hardworking and amazing activist, because it's an inspiration.
Thank you so much. Well, you guys are all inspiring to me too. And, we've got a big challenge, but it's worth making.
Yeah. Angela, I want to ask you, you are well known for what you do with anti-war, to stand up against aggression, state aggression, but in other areas too. And now we see Ross Ulbricht and what he's gone through. What do you see are parallels and lessons we can learn from an anti-war theme and from what has happened with Ross Ulbricht?
Well, there's several things, and I guess I could tear it apart a little bit. Let's say theoretically, I'm not talking about maybe Ross, but Silk Road generally, whatever that is for people, a place to trade freely, is that free trade. And I know everyone who's gone on before me has made this point in some way or another, but obviously free trade, and they'll give the Bastiat quote. But it is true. When we trade with people, it humanizes them and it brings people closer. And it's a lot harder to bomb them when you see people there. Yeah. And so that certainly is one aspect of it. But second, to go back to how many people we have in cages. And sometimes we're saying that rhetoric sounds harsh, but people need to understand that is what prison is, and it's not. There's so many TV shows on the lower cable channels that are glorifying the prison complexes and cops and what it means in being incarcerated, and even in some ways, like a show that I do love but is kind of politically different is Orange is the New Black, glamorizing what it means to not have your freedom. I do think we need to find ways that are soft and harsh and always in between to approach people on why imprisonment is wrong. Everything that's gone on, that's been discussed today, everything with technology, and the person who came on before me with the caller about the internet being the most important thing to happen in 600 years or whatever. That's amazing, but we're living in the future, and the future doesn't have prisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can tell you from being at the prison, it's not glamorous. It's not fun. It's a heartbreaking thing for the inmates, for their families, for their children. And there's nothing glamorous about it at all. There's nothing beautiful, except the spirits that are in there that are making the best of it they can. But there's no beauty. There's no nature. There's no, family. And it's devastating. And I haven't watched that show, Orange is the New Black, because I spent enough time in the prison and I just haven't watched it. But to the degree that anything is glamorizing, and I don't know if it is, that world, it's a distortion. And it makes it more palatable in a way, I guess. But it's not palatable. It's horrible. It's really torture in a sense. And it is. And actually where Ross has been called torture by the UN. So for human beings to be, and it is a cage. It is a cage. So, I know firsthand.
Yeah. So, Angela, let me ask you this. We look at the war that is on drugs, the so-called war on drugs. You stand for anti-war, standing against that. What are some specific ways that we can stand against the war on drug in a peaceful way?
Talk to your friends and neighbors who aren't political activists and aren't in libertarian media. So often we just talk amongst each other. So many people, our community is rather large, but it's still, everyone really knows each other, and we don't do enough outreach. I'm sorry, it's a general thought there, but our outreach needs to be about things like this, basic human rights. I mean, this isn't complicated. This isn't like tax law or all the other regulatory and administrative law things that are confusing to explain to people. This is really basic. This means locking someone away, denying him or her of all of his life and any dignity and the ability to live semblance of a normal life. And how hideous that is. That's something that's just really basic. That isn't anything that you have to be a libertarian or an anarchist. You just have to be a decent human being to understand that. And I think that's where you reach people and talk to your religious groups and talk to where you hang out with people, your sports clubs, the things that you do that are outside of politics. And that's where to reach people, because at any time in antiwar.com, there's usually several campaigns going on. Free Chelsea, thank God, the journalist who just got out of prison. Barrett Brown just got out the other day. Like every day, we know there's so many different people, but it's great that we all know that, but it doesn't mean much until the outside world knows about it. Regular people understand it. And the reason why certain political movements are getting attention is because everyone knows about them. And that, it's this story about Ross is a human story. It's a normal story. It's something that could happen, to anyone. It's not something really complicated and something that's out of the possibility or sounds like fantastical. So basically, it's just after we did the usual staff, what's our thoughts on this? It's just the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and it's not, what I've learned is it's not a unique situation. It's not even rare that there's people, thousands and thousands of people who are really living out the same nightmare that Ross is in different ways in our prisons. So it's become an epidemic, really. And so, yeah, it's easy to not look at. It's easy to, put aside because, well, they're locked up somewhere. But it's affecting our whole society, as we've discussed it earlier today. So.
Yeah, and so I want to focus on what you do with the anti-war. It seems like there are times that people are saying, maybe we need to get beyond this nonsense of always going to war. Maybe you're out there on the cutting edges, boots on the ground, living it. What's the reality that you're seeing? Are people opening up to the idea that maybe we don't need to go to war with every country out there?
Well, among my normal friends and family and my neighbors, the people outside my professional world, there's a complete distaste of war. But it's not ideological. They don't discuss it in ideological terms. It isn't complicated. They're not sitting there with the fact sheet about the Iran deal. It's normal people who are sick and tired of this. And there seems to be an ever so slight hint that the country has moved a little bit more toward that direction. But I'm not a political analyst. I don't want to make any predictions. I do think there's just a slight bit of hope right now. Has nothing to do with specifics of whether or not we have cartoon characters in office or not.
Very good point. Well, I'll take any bit of optimism we can get. That will be good. Angela, we appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate you, and it's good to see you again. Somebody wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Angela at antiwar.com.
Angela at antiwar.com. You have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being part of our free Ross-A-Thon.
Thank you, Angela, so much.
Thanks, Angela.
Good night.